I climbed up the gravel path with dirt on my pants and pruning shears still in my back pocket. My sister was standing on the marble terrace of my own home, holding a champagne glass in one hand and pointing directly at me with the other. Emily laughed out loud enough for everyone at the engagement party to hear her. "She's just the gardener," she said emphatically. There were 300 people who were dressed in fashionable gowns and cut suits, and they turned their attention to her. "Don't mind her, she always smells like fertilizer." Cameras began to flash. In fact, someone laughed out loud. Despite the fact that it was the cutest joke in the world, my mother smiled broadly. Taking a proud stance, my father raised his glass in accord. The 29 years of being erased, degraded, and used came crashing down on me like a wave of ice water in that single sentence. But we have to make our way back, simply because that particular moment did not appear out of nowhere. They had been constructing a wall ever since the day I was born, and this was the last brick in the wall. They had erected it with casual dismissals and blatant favoritism, layer by layer, incident by incident, until it towered to such a height that I could hardly see over it. My name is Ava. It is now 32. This is the second daughter, a person who is never expected to be more impressive than everyone else, a person who is responsible from birth, who achieves great things through sheer willpower, and who suffers for a long time in quiet. Emily was the golden child, the one whose light was cultivated while mine was stifled in order to prevent shadows from being cast on her dot. Emily has always been the brightest star in the sky. I was the shadow that kept the lawn immaculate, the one who chopped the margins so that her light may spread unrestrained. I was the one who kept the lawn neat. I can recall the earliest slights like old photographs, each one recording a point in time when my value was evaluated and judged to be lacking. As a child of 3 years old, when I was just tall enough to reach the kitchen counter, I would construct complex towers out of blocks, daydreaming about building castles. They would be knocked down with a delighted swipe from Emily, who was 6 years old at the time. With no ill will, simply a game. However, her mother would pick her up while giggling. "Emily is so full of life and energy." As he read his newspaper, Dad would nod his head. If I were to rebuild by myself, the blocks would be dispersed like my unspoken frustrations." This was the sequence of events. Her anarchy was applauded, and my order was anticipated. As soon as I turned 4, I realized that the backyard was my safe haven. The entire Saturday was spent by me cultivating a small herb garden with packets of basil and mint that I had purchased with the money that I had earned from my first lemonade sale. I carefully counted the quarters and dimes that I had purchased in a jelly jar. When I touched the earth with my little fingers, it felt cool, and the seeds that promised growth were within my control. Emily saw it and made the decision that she wanted to use the space for her kiddie pool made of plastic. She did not utter a single word as she began to haul the hose over, causing water to overwhelm my newly arranged rows. With her assistance, Mom inflated the pool so that it was directly on top of my seedlings. "Ava will make another one," she remarked with a sly look on her face. In the process of carrying towels for Emily, her father said, "She enjoys digging in the dirt. What about my garden? Having drowned, forgotten about?" That moment was the first time I realized that the only time my effort was worthwhile was if it did not cause Emily any inconvenience. After that, as I was laying in bed and stared at the ceiling, the raw pain of it finally hit me. Why did my invention have such a short lifespan? Although I did not cry. The following day I replanted, this time further back and out of sight. Academics were introduced into the mix during kindergarten, which further exacerbated the separation. Having the structure of letters and numbers fit into place was one of my favorite things about school. When I was 5 years old, I read my very first book by myself. It was a straightforward picture book about a puppy that had gone missing. It made me proud to show Mom. As she was assisting Emily with her dolls, she cast a glance upward. "You're very welcome, Ava. Now assist your sister in locating her shoes." There is no praise, not much excitement. When Emily, who was just 8 years old at the time, flawlessly recited a nursery rhyme, the entire family erupted in applause. "We have a young performer here," Dad exclaimed as he lifted her up to his chest. It was a subtle aching that was developing in my chest as I sat calmly with a book clasped in my lap. The situation seemed unfair, but if I complained about it, I would become the issue. In silence, I continued to read, constructing mental worlds in which merit was a significant factor. My heart was pumping with the uncommon confirmation that I was receiving when I won spelling bees at school by the time I was 6 years old. I was standing on stage with a medal around my neck. Emily detested reading, feeling as though her letters were falling all over the page. Therefore, Mom decided to engage a reading specialist for her daughter. who would lead sessions in the living room with flashcards and snacks. What about the money? From the jar in which I had saved the money that I had earned from selling handmade strawberry jam at the local fair, pots of sticky sweet jam that I had stirred over the stove with great precision. When I returned home, with the ribbon I had won in the county spelling contest, I discovered that the invoice for the tutor was sitting on the counter, and my jar was already empty next to it. As Mom put it, the needs of the family come first. My ribbon was displayed on the refrigerator for exactly 1 day, before being replaced by a drawing of a flower that Emily had created. A framed photograph of Emily's first chapter book, which she read haltingly many months later, was placed on the mantel, and it is still there to this day. When I looked at it that night, I felt the weight of invisibility as I stared at it with the ribbon in my drawer. After that, I engaged in extensive introspection. Was I merely valuable as a resource? More was added to the primary school curriculum. For the science fair when I was 7 years old, I constructed a volcano out of baking soda and vinegar, using paper match that I meticulously shaped. It erupted perfectly, earning it the honor of receiving a blue ribbon. How did the parents react? Before moving to Emily's art piece, which was a finger-painted sun that had splattered on the way home, a brief good job was all that was said. Hers was framed by them. The mine accumulated dust. It was heightened by the holidays. Emily received a plethora of presents during the Christmas season, including dollhouses, gowns, and toys. Books, clothes that are functional, and a puzzle set are my dad remarked, Ava enjoys things that are quiet. Her Easter basket was stuffed to the brim with chocolate eggs and stuffed bunnies, whereas mine included a few jelly beans and a notebook. Mom cooed, she's so mature, as if maturity gave her permission to overlook the gap. With the age of 8 came sports. I became a member of the soccer team and scored goals with deliberate kicks. Emily attempted to do ballet while wearing a tutu. What about our weekends? She gave recitals. For travel, gasoline, and costumes that are brand new. What about my cleats? A pair of hand-me-downs from a cousin with knotted laces. To my surprise, they arrived late from Emily's dance lesson when I earned the Most Valuable Player award at the age of 9. Mom said we couldn't miss her pirouette as she walked away. The award was sitting on my shelf, unnoticed by anyone. However, what about Emily's participation flag? It was hung in the corridor. 9 years old. My placement tests were perfect, and I was able to qualify for the gifted program. I was filled with joy as I imagined myself attending advanced programs. On average, Emily, who was 12 years old, cried for several days. What is Dad's answer? Don't let me go. In a strong tone, he stated, we cannot allow even one of our daughters to feel inferior. However, Emily attended private enrichment classes on Saturdays, which included art, music, and anything else piqued her interest. I continued to attend regular lessons, and my ennui continued to grow. I was able to teach myself algebra by reading library books while hiding beneath the covers with a flashlight. The pages of the books whispered equations to me. As the nights dragged on, I reflected on the sacrifice that had been made. My potential was diminished in order to light hers. There was a knot in my throat and a raw agony there, but I managed to swallow it. I prefer actions over words. When I was 10 years old, my family went on a beach vacation. Emily was given the room with a view of the ocean, and I slept on the pull-out couch. While she had fun in the waves, I was by myself collecting shells. After she suffered a sunburn, she spent the entire day resting in the shade and applying aloe. Is it my knee that I scraped while exploring rocks, bandaged by oneself? When we got back to our house, we processed the photographs, which showed all of Emily smiling while building you. In the backdrop, there are buckets being held. I started baking cookies for school fundraisers when I was 11 years old, and I mastered the recipes through a process of trial and error. I raised money for the class trips by selling hundreds of copies, helping by eating dough. Emily wanted to be a part of it. Upon achieving the title of top seller, her name was placed at the top of the certificate. The mother remarked, she is the face. I did not speak when I mixed the subsequent batch. 12 years old. When I first started my lawn mowing company in the area, I would go door to door with a rusted mower for customers. I dreamed of having a bike, so I put every dollar I wanted to save in a shoebox under my bed. At the age of 15, Emily demanded a phone. For family equity, my mother grabbed half of my funds and then handed it over to me. She said, sisters don't take turns the following summer. I mowed twice as many lawns, and as a result, I developed calluses and blisters. Emily upgraded to a nicer phone, and she switched cases every week. my bicycle. A used vehicle with squeaking pedals was purchased. My labor fueled her luxuries. I thought to myself as I pushed uphill throughout that summer, and my reflection hit me like a ton of bricks. At the age of 13, puberty began. After getting braces, Emily's teeth were straight and dazzling. As a result of insurance only covering one at a time, mine was crooked for a longer period of time. I smiled less in photographs. Her poses were never-ending parties held in middle school. After engaging in self-study, I joined a debate group and won arguments using logic that I had developed. Emily courted her way to the homecoming court by flirting. Parents were present at her dances. "What about mine tournaments?" "This is too far," stated Dad. My teammates and I ride in a carpool. When I was 14 years old, I got my first work at a garden center, where I was responsible for potting plants and providing advice on fertilizers. College funds deposited from paychecks. Emily received a double of her allowance for social needs. I weeded our yard for free while she indulged in sunbathing. 15. Driver's education class. It was my first attempt, and I was successful. 2 times, Emily was unsuccessful. In any case, her parents purchased a car for her, my own, gas on me, borrowed money on a periodic basis. In high school, the gap became even wider. When I was a freshman, I took a lot of honors classes, which helped my grade point average skyrocket. Emily, a senior, went out and partied. I studied by lamplight after my curfew was enforced for consistency after she was grounded for her behavior at a party that she had crashed. I volunteered my time at the local historical society during my sophomore year, where I worked on restoring antique maps. Cheerleading was Emily's new hobby. Camps and uniforms are both financially supported. What is my prize for volunteering? A certificate that is stored in a drawer. What about her pump? Exhibited in? Prepare for the SAT throughout your junior year. I achieved a score of 1550 on my own. Tutors were assigned to Emily's 1100 class. My parents were ecstatic about her progress, but they did not mention mine. The final year of high school, every single university that I applied to provided me with full-ride academic scholarships, and I was accepted into all of them. Emily received a C average and barely graduated. I sat down to eat dinner with my father. Feelings of guilt twisted when the speaker said, "If you went too far away, it would break your sister's heart." As a result, I decided to attend the public school in my area that offered the most prestigious business program. I commuted every day, and the landscapes were blurred by the bus travels. In order for Emily to attend a private college located outside of her home state, my parents co-signed loans for her education. I would later learn that these loans were partially funded by cashing in the savings bonds that my late grandmother had left particularly to me in her will. These bonds were intended for my education. Years later, when searching through old documents, I came upon that discovery. Even back then, the betrayal was still quite painful. Lectures on finance, marketing, and real estate law are what I look forward to most about college. I was able to pay for my own education by working 3 jobs. I worked as a barista in the mornings, as a tutor in the afternoons, and as a freelance landscaper on the weekends. Dorm room? Extremely costly. I had to commute home. Emily would return from her break with brand new outfits, fancy handbags, and tales of her experiences at fraternity parties and sorority form. My parents always made sure to throw her a BBQ to celebrate her return, complete with grill smoking and steaks. My exhaustion from closing shifts caused me to come home fatigued. I prepared my own ramen and studied at the kitchen table as they watched television in the next room, with laughing flowing over the air. "No barbecues for me, please." Regarding my dean's list, there are no questions. At the age of 21, I graduated with a summa cum laude degree using my own cap and gown. They were unable to attend the ceremony because Emily had a hair appointment for a pool party that she had arranged to attend, which she had received an invitation to. This is what Mom texted: "We'll celebrate later." The later never arrived. After that, I went to a wayside diner by myself, still wearing my regalia, and tasted a burger that tasted like cardboard. People I did not know congratulated me, my family, not a sound. After I received my degree, I began my career in real estate by working as an assistant for a company that managed rural properties. The analyst reached 22 and the manager reached 23 without much delay, saved bonuses in a consistent manner. Emily worked as a waitress in retail and as an aspiring actress between jobs. Both her rent and her audition trips were paid for by her parents. At the age of 24, I came across an advertisement for 10 acres of depleted farmland that nobody wanted. The property had rolling hills that had been disfigured by opening a dilapidated manor home from the 1890s with leaking roofs and overgrown fields. Foreclosure. A bank manager who is hesitant to approve my application is intimidating. On the other hand, I recognized promise. I purchased it and gave it the name Briarhaven, which was derived from the wild roses that were tangled up in the fences. Over the course of 8 years, I committed every extra hour of overtime, every bonus, and every vacation day that I skipped to it. Horticulture was learned through online classes, and hands were burned while planting fields of lavender, which now provide a fragrant scent to the air. The historical restoration included the removal of wallpaper, the refinishing of flooring, and the acquisition of antique fixtures. Customers for event management include weddings and business clients. Brick by brick, the greenhouse was reconstructed, and the glass panes were sparkling, converted rundown barns into luxurious guest cottages that feature en-suite bathrooms and scenic vistas. By the time Briarhaven turned 31, it had become a jewel, with weddings booked 2 years in advance, corporate retreats, and festivals, achieving a revenue of $1.2 million on an annual basis. I continued to do the majority of the gardening myself because I cherished the honesty of the soil and because I did not trust anyone else with my heritage roses, which had petals as fragile as forgotten dreams. Meanwhile, Emily had gone through 6 phases that were considered to be almost famous. For a 22-year-old model, headshots are paid for by her parents, and gigs are few. 24-year-old proprietor of a boutique who had a store lease on their credit and had closed after 6 months. At the age of 26, I am being paid for my qualifications, yet I have no clients. As a 27-year-old crypto investor, investments from dad's 401k account are yielding growing losses. The studio membership is free for a yoga instructor who is 28 years old. Landings are always gentle, and cushions are thick. She became engaged to Tristan, the heir to a wine label of the middle tier, when she was 29 years old. Tristan had vineyards in Napa, a flawless jawline on Instagram, and no personality beyond filters. A ring for the engagement. There was a continuous flash of 6 digits. Their wedding price swelled above $300,000 before they had even chosen a date. They had 2 hire coordinators from Los Angeles and a gown from Paris. When that happened, the texts began, and at first they were harmless. If we take engagement shots at Briarhaven, is it possible? Yes, I said, arranging my schedule around the bookings that were already made. The photos turned out to be extravagant. Drones, stylists, and my lavender fields were little trampled. Then, is it possible for us to have the rehearsal dinner there? Family tradition, I agreed to participate in the rehearsal because I was sick of being the bad guy in family conversations. The wedding, however, it is not. On that particular weekend, I had 12 events scheduled. Emily sobbed to her mother. I must not be able to cancel contracts worth $1 million for a private party. Mom sobbed to her father. In a loud voice, my father referred to me as ungrateful. It's essentially the property of the family. I remained steadfast, setting the phone down in a calm manner. They did this while I was not looking. Subtle escalations include Emily borrowing keys for the purpose of scouting and vendors using the phone to confirm that Ms. Upon my return from a landscaping symposium in Portland, where I had taken notes on sustainable irrigation, I discovered that the situation was in complete disarray. The gravel drive on my property is being clogged by trucks, and crews are stringing fairy lights in my heirloom orchards, putting limbs in danger. The seedlings in my greenhouse were displaced as a result of a florist moving truckloads of imported peonies into my greenhouse. Emily had used an old LLC form that I had signed for a joint charity event many years ago to counterfeit my signature on vendor contracts. She had informed everyone that Briarhaven was the family estate and that she was the event organizer. She had sent out invoices for the engagement party alone that totaled $85,000, which included meals created by Michelin chefs, specialty bars, and pyrotechnics. I entered the house, my boots leaving behind a trail of muck that I would later remove, and found her directing cameras in my renovated kitchen, which featured marble countertops that I had carefully polished myself. Unannounced and on my property, the engagement party began to take place at that same moment. The ballroom was filled with a string quartet, champagne was flowing, and influential guests were strolling around, with thorns snagging my sleeves, soil under my nails, and grass stains on my knees. I had spent the entire morning trimming the heritage roses that were located in the back 40. When she glanced at me, I was exactly what she was looking for. Staff? Not oh no. Emily laughed once again as she tossed her hair extensions, which had a price tag that was greater than the first payment on my automobile. She's just the gardener, she said. As the crowd tittered, they were cruelly polite. In the process of filming, phones emerged. Seriously, Ava, would you mind taking a shower? You are making us look foolish, my mother exclaimed with a nod of approval. Dad chuckled and raised his glass to his chin as he said, Sweetie, maybe change before pictures. Take a few deep breaths. This is a racing pulse. All of the minor details were repeated. The ribbon was removed, bonds were cashed, graduation was skipped, and Emily's bedroom was transformed into her content closet during her college breaks. Every single one of them solidified, uncooked to the core. Like thorns, I felt as though I was being smashed into my chest. As for me, I remained silent. Do not yell. There is no appeal. Turned around. I left on foot. In a series of steps, that night, in the peace and quiet of my potting shed, where the tools were neatly hung and the earthy aroma was grounding, I separated. The air is icy and poetic. Night jasmine blossomed like a flowering plant. Calls made when the lamplight was on. First, the merchants. In every single contract, the signature was falsified. Original documents demonstrating sole ownership of the LLC were faxed to you. The scans have been sent. Within 48 hours, deposits are repaid. Apologies are coming as contracts are nullified. After that, the county clerk, the protections for Briarhaven are unwavering, and it is a registered historic landmark. Emily's event designer submitted designs for a permanent marble dance floor over a protected wildflower meadow, which is habitat for endangered species, as well as the destruction of 120-year-old olive trees for sightlines. Permits? This is categorically denied. Plans were messed up and were never filed correctly. Infractions have been reported. And finally, insurance. A state insurance policy worth $10 million. Forgery is what sets off the fraud investigation, and unauthorized events nullify coverage. They were informed. The investigation was launched the same day, and agents were sent out. Influencers come in forth. Without my consent, sponsored guests promoting brands while they were on my home. Letters of cease and desist addressed to businesses nice and firm. Hashes came to a standstill. Endorsements were withdrawn. On the other hand, the trap became even more ominous. I allowed the planning to cook. Emily bragged on her Instagram account, which has 400,000 followers, that her family's estate was hosting the wedding of the decade. As she did so, she smiled faintly at family dinners but said nothing else. Hashtag Briarhaven Bride, hashtag Family Legacy. The number of likes skyrocketed. Stories were told. In the aftermath of the cancellations, I even sent a gift box filled with lavender honey from Briarhaven to the fallback resort. On the card, best wishes. A poetic irony involving management. The suspense and tension increased as the days passed. 2 weeks later, they snuck in and planned a party to celebrate the engagement of the replay. The tents were rented through Shell LLC and set up on the lower lawn. Emily's voice memory message to her bridesmaids, which was later leaked, stated, "Possession is night, 6 in the morning." They arrived. Trucks rumbling and crews unloading. Found gates locked, and my newly installed security cameras were operating. The lights of 3 county sheriff's SUVs are pulsing as they idle. Olive trees that were surveyed and flagged as heritage the week before were subject to a fine of $150,000 per tree that was removed. In addition to jail time for the intent to remove the tree, I was at the terrace, wearing a silk blouse, heels, and a steaming cup of coffee. I observed the approaching deputies. She let out a shriek. Tristan's speech was stuttering. His wealthy parents, who were shocked, made an attempt to bribe him. With their cuffs shining, the officers laughed. As evidence of conspiracy, trespass, and forgery, phones were taken into custody. The sound of boots crunching, voices commanding, and papers being served was electric during the raid. This bystander clip went viral after it was leaked by Dawn. 280 million views in just 48 hours for the video titled, "Influencer Tries to Steal Sister's Estate for Engagement Party. Gets Shut Down by Actual Owner." The headlines were blaring. Emily was immediately dropped by brands, and her contracts were terminated. Overnight, the number of followers dropped by 200,000, and comments were harsh. Entitled, "Much. Public humiliation is persistent and unrelenting." The court then proceeded to indict the defendant for fraud and forgery. Heavy fines, including restitution for damages and a fine of $500,000 for violations of landmarks. Covering legal fees depleted the savings of the parents' retirement. His family disowned the mess, and he disappeared without a trace. Getting married. Relegated to the backyard at mom and dad's house, with a sheet cake from Costco, a Spotify playlist, and a maximum of 50 guests. Photographs, desperately filtered and inexpensive. It was a reverberation of humiliation. Whispers at clubs, invitations revoked. The mother called crying, "It's too late to save her." My response was even-keeled, "No." She put an end to her own. All I did was refuse to mulch it any longer. There are no more words. I am hung up. It was victory that hushed in. The mine at Briarhaven is doing well. Held a lavender festival that was completely sold out on the same weekend, with 12,000 attendees, live bands, and artisan stalls. Profits skyrocketed. There is no family enlisted. 6 months later, Emily sent her final text message, which read, "I hate you. It has been removed." Rather than that, I planted a new rose garden. Second daughter is a central hybrid, and it has burgundy petals and thorns that are as sharp as justice. Briarhaven is currently booking 3 years in advance. I travel visiting cafes in Paris and vineyards in Napa, ironic, and I hire a full grounds team. On my own terms, I shall date entrepreneurs and architects. Have a restful, full-body sleep. Manor aromas include roses, honey, and freedom. Lavender flowers bloom in a purple color on hills every spring. I am by myself as I walk Rose at sunset. The warm glow of peace envelops her. There are no shadows. If this story struck you in the chest in the same way that it still does sometimes strike me, I would ask you to do me a favor and click that subscribe button. You should give it a like so that the algorithm will display it to every other daughter who has ever been instructed to maintain silence and keep the lawn looking nice. In addition, please let me know in the comments where you are watching the game tonight. At what point did your family come to the conclusion that you were just something, and how did you ultimately disprove their assumption? I read each and every one of them.